First off, hello and welcome to our Fireside Chat. My name is Jacqueline Bruner. I'm the Senior Director of Encoding Technology at FHIR-Side, and myself, along with my colleague Gilles Dereau, who's FHIR-Side's Senior Director of Global Life Science Solutions, we're going to be your hosts today as we talk about FHIR and the SPL-FHIR pilot that the FDA had in June. So I'm going to start with a brief slide presentation on some FHIR fundamentals and the SPL-FHIR pilot process and outcomes. And then we're going to open the floor to everyone and answer any questions you might have. So I hope you have lots together. So if we're going to start just with some regular housekeeping, first off, be sure to have your microphone on mute. And if you use a phone to listen to the presentation, make sure your computer audio volume is off. After the presentation, Gilles and I welcome questions. As I said, this is a fireside chat after all. So you can either type them into the chat panel or raise your virtual hand and ask. If you're typing them into the chat, be sure to send them to everyone so we don't miss any. And due to the Q&A nature, this presentation is not going to be recorded for distribution, but we will compile a list of the questions and answers and send them out to all of the attendees. So we've got quite a few of our customers here today. We're really glad you could make it. And for those who might not be as familiar with FHIR, firstly, welcome. And secondly, just to give you a brief introduction to FHIR, we're specialists in structured content for pharmaceutical labeling. We've got a suite of tools for authoring and publishing, as well as a crack regulatory team who provide outsourcing services for XML submissions. We've been working for over 20 years with the FDA, Health Canada, the EMA, and other global health authorities as they transition to international standards for structured product information and its interoperability. Most recently, we support a large number of the industry participants in the FDA's SPL-FHIR pilot, and we set aside time today to share our experience and to do our best to address any questions you might have. So I'm going to start with a basic FHIR introduction, and then we're going to talk about the SPL-FHIR pilot process and wrap up the presentation portion of the session with a quick look at the road ahead for SPL and FHIR. And then Gilles and I are going to move to the Q&A portion and answer any questions that you have. So as promised, we're just going to start with a very brief overview of FHIR. The FHIR acronym actually tells you a lot about this standard. The F stands for fast, and we all know that time is of the essence in the healthcare world. The H stands for healthcare, which is the space that FHIR was developed for. The I is for interoperability. FHIR allows data to be exchanged between different systems, and that's something that SPL does not have the ability to do. And finally, the R is for resources. There are over 157 categories of FHIR data or resources, and each resource contains specialized data elements. For example, there's one for substances, which that resource would hold the ingredient name, the code, and it might also hold the molecular weight, the chemical structure, the quality standard, etc., things like that. There's another resource for ingredients, which only holds the ingredient strength and the basis of strength for a specific product. So the ingredient resource would link to the substance resource so that in a FHIR labeling document, you get the full range of information about the ingredient in the context of a specific product. The categories of resources are not limited to labeling. They cover all aspects of healthcare, including patient information, medication prescribing, manufacturing, diagnostics, billing, and a lot more. So there's a lot of reasons why there is interest in moving from SPL to FHIR. Currently, SPL is mainly used in North America, while FHIR is generating a global fan base, meaning collaboration and data exchange will be a possibility between jurisdictions. SPL only covers labeling, and as I mentioned, FHIR covers all aspects of healthcare. SPL is for communication between systems within a single healthcare establishment, while FHIR allows for communication between different healthcare systems. HL7 FHIR is a more modern exchange standard. It's modular, forward and backward compatible, and it includes the communication API for data exchange on top of the data and content. So I have a map here that shows the far reaches of FHIR. Many regulatory authorities, including the EMA in Europe, the FDA in the US, and those in Jordan, Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, Taiwan, Brazil, and more, are working on adoption. And we seem to hear about new ones getting on board almost every week. Both the EMA and the FDA have had FHIR API pilots. And in Jordan, it will be mandatory in January of 2025, which is only 5 months away. So it is all part of a worldwide API movement. So moving on, I'll tell you a little bit about the SPL-FHIR pilot. So first of all, it was a very short pilot. It was only on for the month of June. And it was also very limited to the number of participants. There were only 9 sponsors that were approved for participation. And we were fortunate enough to participate in partnership with 4 of them. Everyone was provided with the FDA's SPL-FHIR implementation guide, sample files, and access to the portal. And in the portal, we could upload and validate FHIR XML files, view them in a style sheet, and then download the HTML renderings. And in total, there were 405 XML SPL-FHIR files submitted during that 1-month period. So the pilot objectives from the FDA's point of view were to test the FDA's SPL-FHIR implementation guide, to test the FDA's FHIR validation to get feedback on the error messages, to test and get feedback on the SPL-FHIR style sheet, and to get feedback on the processes and tools that were used by the participants to create the SPL-FHIR files. And at FHIR, we had our own objectives for the pilot. We wanted to gain more in-depth knowledge about the FDA's SPL-FHIR implementation, the validation, and the style sheet. And we also wanted to make sure that our tools for creating SPL-FHIR XML files are compliant. And of course, our main objective was to support the 4 sponsors we were actively working with in the pilot. So as I mentioned, all participants had access to the SPL-FHIR implementation guide, which I will say is very different than the SPL implementation guide. We were also given 3 sample products to demonstrate how to code different situations such as nested packaging and kits. The FDA held regular meetings, they had them before the pilot to familiarize everybody with the portal and the implementation guide and the process in general. And during the pilot, they had twice weekly in-office sessions, and we were able to ask any questions that we wanted to and offer feedback. And we were also encouraged to send feedback and questions via email or through the portal. So the process that we followed with each sponsor was that we would meet with them before the pilot began to discuss the pilot and figure out what files they wanted to have us convert to the FHIR format. And we helped them make sure that they could all access the portal and log in. Then from our partner sponsors, they would provide us with their SPL files that they wanted to use for this pilot. We open them up in our application, FHIR-L, and then we publish the files from FHIR-L into the FHIR XML format. And throughout the pilot, we also met with our partners as well to check in. So once we published the SPL files into the FHIR format, we would actually start working in the portal then. So we would log into the portal and validate the file. And when we had validation errors, we consulted with the implementation guide. If we couldn't find a resolution, then we would consult with the FDA, either via email or often during those bi-weekly meetings that we had. And when the file was valid, we could view it in the style sheet. We would download the HTML rendering in order to display the images in the style sheet because there wasn't support for images in this pilot. And then we would provide our partner sponsor with a valid FHIR file, as well as the HTML rendering and the images. And we also attended, as I said, and actively participated in the twice weekly meetings with the FDA and provided implementation suggestions and information to their pilot team. So there's some fundamental differences between SPL and FHIR that we also have to keep in mind. For example, the content in FHIR is plain HTML, which means that CSS can be used for formatting. And the FDA didn't limit the CSS formatting used during the pilot, but in the future, they might provide more guidance on what formatting can and can't be used. Image handling in FHIR is completely different from SPL. In SPL, the images are separate from the XML file and they have to be managed separately. In FHIR, the images are held as binary data or code directly within the XML file. So there's no separate image files. But no, as I mentioned for the pilot, the images were still referenced as JPEG files, but that was just a limitation of this pilot system and this pilot program. And the main metadata differences are the implementation of packaging, kits, and the reuse possibilities. In SPL, packaging is organized from inner to outer, such as you'd have 100 tablets in a bottle and 1 bottle in a carton. And in FHIR, the packaging starts with the outermost packaging. So it would be a carton contains a bottle and the bottle contains 100 tablets. And that would then link to a manufactured item resource. Another difference is kits. Some products in SPL had to be represented as kits, even though they really weren't kits. So for example, if you have a blister that contains 2 of one tablet and then 2 of a different tablet, that in SPL needed to be represented as a kit. In FHIR, it could still be represented as a kit. However, it could also be represented more accurately and show that each blister contains 2 different manufactured items. And in SPL, the ingredient, the package, and the part metadata can't be shared between products, even if they're identical. But in FHIR, it can be. So each unique ingredient, package, configuration, or part of a kit could be coded once, and then it could reference multiple products. And on a larger scale, there could also be reuse of data between different document types. So you could have the substance resource could be used in both a FHIR SPL and a FHIR PQCMC document. So, big thing I know everybody's wondering about is what's the next steps for FHIR in SPL, or SPL in FHIR, sorry. The FDA are continuing to update and add capabilities to the SPL-FHIR implementation guide, and there will be more pilots in the future, they said. So we're going to keep an eye out for that, of course. And as for ourselves, we are continuing to work closely with key EPI FHIR working groups and our customers as they participate in pilots and prepare to meet emerging requirements. Our software is SPL-FHIR ready and will soon also be EPI FHIR ready in both our desktop and our global enterprise solution. And our regulatory team even publish FHIR ready submissions. So we are ready for FHIR. We're also ready to move on to the Q&A portion of our session. If you haven't sent in questions, please feel free to do so. Just use the WebEx chat panel, or you can raise your virtual hand and we will try to get to everybody that we can.